Yeah, Assemblyman Pidgeon.
I want to just pick up a couple of things on process and this audit report. At the meeting where you first instructed Michael that officers should send this report, the fatigue report, to the various investigating bodies, was the health and safety manager there the person who eventually did send it to them? Was that person sitting in the meeting?
Yeah, I'm just going to check my memory, which is not 100%, but she was, I believe, all of those meetings, quite appropriately. I mean, we were taking this very, very seriously. Yes. So yes, she would have been
Leon
there.
Daniels would have been there as well, and others.
Yes.
So normally at meetings, I don't know how everyone works, but if somebody says, and that report should be sent, you don't just rely on the minutes. Often you make a note yourself. So do you find it surprising that between the Managing Director of Surface Transport, the Health and Safety Manager and others, that no one had made a note that actually they needed to send this report on?
I would be hugely surprised if no note was taken, because the context is also that at the board meeting, but also at every single committee and panel, there are members of the Secretariat that supports the board, and they make copious notes. They sit there and they make notes. Yes. And so... which is also relevant for the point about the word choreography, but that may be an unfortunate word. I would have used managing the process if if I had been in that situation. But let me, if I might continue, because the issue is not the use of the word. The issue is whether there was any investigation. In other words, the notes of the various participants in that meeting and their subsequent messaging on whatever system is used should have been investigated. That was what was required. Those notes probably still exist unless they've miraculously gone in a shredder. Who knows?
And can I just ask you, as chair of the committee, were you sent draft minutes of meetings to sign off, or was that done by the Secretariat or officers?
Yes, we would. Absolutely. We'd see a draft. It would go to the chair and the deputy chair usually.
So
I'm actually think it would go to. I'm trying to remember because I was either deputy chair or then chair on that committee. I'm trying to think of the other committee I was on the finance committee, whether I always saw draft or whether those were handled by chair and deputy chair.
So you didn't as chair?
But as chair, I absolutely saw
so you
yes.
you yourself also missed?
Yes.
I'm just thinking when I sit at meetings and I'm chairing, I often note things and check with the team afterwards when we write to TfL with a long list that it has picked up.
If I might, it was so extraordinary that this was not sent. It never crossed, how would it cross your mind to check something so basic as sending this piece of information? Because we were talking about lots of different things. There was lots of points of follow-up and so on. And this just didn't seem like, it wasn't like there was a huge fuss made over it. It wasn't contentious. There was nobody saying we shouldn't send it. And so it didn't get minuted, and of course I hugely regret not noticing that, as I regret other things not being correctly minuted that I now notice.
Yeah. Okay, that's really helpful. Heidi, you wanted to come in there?
Well, partly the point I wanted to make is the sort of line of questioning that you've just pursued there, which is that, Michael, it's my understanding that you and the members of the SSHRP would have signed off the minutes from that November meeting, and you did not ask for anything additional to be added on this specific issue. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, and a great regret.
Okay. So then the other thing I wanted to ask is, and this is a process thing really for you, Heidi, is how happy are you with the general internal audit process at TfL, and how documents from initial drafts to final draft end up being changed significantly? And this is all reminiscent of the Garden Bridge, quite frankly, where we were sent an audit report and then someone actually leaked to our committee earlier drafts which have been more damning. And, we've now, thanks to work of many people, managed to get hold of these internal audit reports and the drafts and the emails. And it absolutely shows that the original one, very strongly here, audit conclusion requires improvement right there on the front. But by the time it was published in March 2018, it had been significantly changed. Safety deficiencies that had been marked as priorities were now opportunities for improvement. TfL agreed to revise the draft after executives at TOL objected. It was too critical. and contradicted a verbal assurance they've been given. I'm not sure whether internal auditors should be giving any assurances to anyone about what would end up in a final report. What are you doing looking at that audit process? Because for us as lay members, that's a serious concern.
So my understanding is that TfL don't agree that that verbal assurance was given. I have gone through both the first version of this fatigue audit report and the final version, as you would expect me to. And, you know, I've gone through every single bullet point in the executive summary to make sure that the issues that are being raised there were to be found in that final version. And I've done a very thorough cross-check. They all are there. So I slightly disagree with your characterisation of this whole process, because substantively the recommendations and the findings of that audit have not been changed. There's been some minor revisions, some reordering, and clearly when an audit is done, it is normal practice for the people conducting the audit to go back to those that they are auditing. The process of improving fatigue management in FIRST, as I understand it, was a continual journey from when Sandylands has happened. You know, I'm not an expert in the world of audit, and, you know, the requires improvement categorisation that was in the first compared to the last in terms of those two words, would it have been better with hindsight for those words to be in there? Then my view is probably yes, but I understand that this was about a dialogue between TfL and First Group about whether they were being audited against industry best practice or what they were contractually required to deliver. The significant thing for me in all of this is the steps that First have taken since all the investigations have been done into Sandylands, since this fatigue audit has been produced, to actually change the performance within trams on safety. And if you look at what they've done, and I know this has been shared with the committee in an earlier session, but I think it is worth saying again, you know, they have
We're going to come on to that later on, Dr.
Okay.
Mayor. Yeah.
But, you know, there's a lot of steps that First have taken to improve both safety culture and performance, whether that's been reviewing rosters, whether it's been reducing the number of consecutive days that tram drivers can work, whether it's fitting the fatigue detection device in the seats of drivers, whether it's been making sure that all managers at First who are running the trams have been trained in fatigue management. It's my understanding that the ORR have now written to the RAIB and said that they consider that the recommendations that the RAIB made about fatigue have now been implemented. And so I think that we can go over, and I'm happy to speak at great length about these issues, but I do think the important thing here is what steps have been taken to make sure that the tram network is as safe as possible and that never again will a tragedy like Sandylands occur.
And we're not disputing that, and we've been down and did a site visit and heard firsthand some of the excellent work and leading work they're doing now in this area, but clearly at this time there are issues, and I'm just trying to get back to process, and I know that's very dull, but that's so important. What are you doing to review the internal audit process to assure yourself that this is the norm? Because for me, I don't think it is the norm in other organisations that you can, managers, yes, they can change factually correct, they can't water down, change the narrative in something, water down the narrative around the conclusions of a report. And that's what worried me. That's what happened on the Garden Bridge. In my view, we've seen it here. I accept what you're saying, that the recommendations are the same, but the narrative was softened, it was changed. And I feel that's kind of overstepping the mark. And I would like to see you agree to do some work looking at audit and best practice to make sure that TfL are not acting in an inappropriate way.